Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're here, I believe you're a fan of the Not Overthinking podcast, and yes, I'm an absolute fan of the podcast. It's actually the second podcast which I've ever listened to, but the first which I truly enjoy listening to. And today, I'm here to share about the 3 things I've learned from the Not Overthinking podcast by Ali and Taimur. Enjoy. First, after listening to this podcast, I realized that when you start a podcast with someone with your close, it actually just automatically creates a lot of topic because instead of you talking a topic by yourself, you can easily converse with someone else and the conversation becomes an interesting topic. When we look at the Not Overthinking podcast, it's not necessarily a educational podcast, it's not like interview or whatever, it's not really talking about a particular niche, it's literally just conversations between 2 brothers. Yeah, and this gives me an idea to actually start a podcast with my girlfriend, which now turned into the Ink Thoughts podcast here. Yeah, if you're interested, feel free to check it out. This idea of having so many topics just like gave me an idea, why don't I just create a podcast with my girlfriend since we are going on a long distance relationship and having a podcast. It's actually generating content, one thing, and then it's fairly easy to generate the content compared to YouTube or whatever, because podcasts we don't need to like set up cameras or whatever. We can just like sit on our desk, microphone there, start recording. 1 hour later it's like done, and average like the whole including recording it's like 4 to 5 hours to like finish uploading it, including vlog. So it's a really easy thing, and it just keeps I'll say maybe one thing for both of us to actually do together, even though we are like now 10,000 kilometers apart. So this is the first thing which I've learned, but it actually helped me, and I've now created a podcast, and it's been like 4 or 5 months since I've started it. The second thing which I've learned is actually about sharing. Actually, it's like totally okay to share. All these while I actually have this fear of like sharing. Like I'm wondering like, if I talk about this, if I talk about that, would people think that I share too much, or like I'm just being too talkative or something? Like wanting people to know about my life. I'm actually afraid about that. But after listening to this, whatever they talk about is whatever that happened in their life. Like even they have a topic for each of the episodes, but the first sometimes 20 to 30 minutes might not even relate to that topic, because they're just genuinely sharing about their life, like what they felt happy about, what they just genuinely want to share about. So from that, I found out that it's just fine to share about whatever you want to share, as long as it's not something like negative or something. It's like quite positive, like they're sharing their positive experience, whatever they're happy about, so it's okay to share. So what happened is that don't worry about people judging whatever you're sharing, because as long as it's something positive, something that is, and it might not even need to be helpful, it's just positive, it's like something that you're happy about. I don't know, I've listened to like 70 episodes, I have no idea, I'm actually not sure, like 70 episodes, and yeah, I just enjoyed all of it. I laughed, I listened it when I'm driving, and then I just laughed a long way. So yeah, I mean, like sharing is totally fine, and that's why it made me create this podcast, and it just gave me a platform to share like almost week, because we record it weekly. So on the podcast we just share whatever we felt that week. So yeah, it's totally okay to share. The third thing which I actually learned from this podcast is quite related to the second one, how interesting our lives is. So sometimes we think that, wait, our lives isn't that interesting, you know, like what should we talk about? Like what should we share? Like people won't think that it's interesting, right? But the thing is, we shouldn't think of how people think of our life. Our interesting doesn't get defined by others. We define how interesting our life is. Because the thing is, you live your life quite similar every day, that it may have become bland for you. But in fact, everyone lives different lives. And when you look at like that's why we envy and jealous someone else's life, even though they might not think that my life is like any unique. That's the thing, because when you're looking at a mirror, you just see that you're so normal because you're looking at yourself, and that is what you have been seeing for like years or even decades. So our life is actually interesting, and don't really worry about not like that our life is not interesting. That's why I actually when we started our podcast, Verene rarely shared when we talk about like how was our week or something, because she just never thought that her life is interesting. Then I actually told her that, yeah, like our life is interesting if you think it is, literally. And we don't need to care about how other people think, but maybe at one point if you're really creating a show or something, you kind of limit the time, but then you don't need to care so much about like, oh, is this part of my life interesting, therefore should I share it? Just share it. If you think it's interesting, just share it. You are the one that makes it interesting. If you're interesting, if you find that it's interesting, your narration, your sharing will make others think that it's interesting as well, because you are enthusiastic about it. This is the third thing which I've shared, which I've learned from this podcast. So yeah, what have I gained from this podcast? I mean, I've generally talked about what I have actually gained from this podcast and from whatever I've said just now. First, I've created a podcast. Second, like through the podcast, it is actually a sharing platform where I literally, sometimes even before the podcast, because me and Verene now, we just video call, and when we video call, we tend to have quite a lot of things we want to share to each other, like live updates and everything. So yeah, we just talk to each other, and sometimes I even felt like, no, let me just like hold this thing which I want to share, because I felt like if I talk about it now, I might not talk about it in the podcast, but yeah, I can just like talk about it in the podcast, and then it'll be a fun thing to share about. And then yeah, I'm just genuinely happy about this thing, and genuinely I find this thing quite interesting. So it gave me a really good platform to share. And finally, yeah, it made me realize that we just don't really need to care about other people's judgment, because like people don't really care about you. Like this is what Ali has said in a few of his videos as well. Like people are just too busy living their own lives. Like who cares about what you do there? Like, who cares about this podcast? Like actually even now, our podcast average audience is 7. I have no idea if those are constant listeners. I hope they are. Thanks a lot. And yeah, like if they do want to listen, they'll listen. If they don't listen, they don't. But yeah, something I do hope is that for those that maybe listen once and then stop listening, I would love for them to like maybe contact me or something, like tell me whatever we can improve or something. But yeah, overall, I am quite happy to have this podcasting, even though it didn't blow up, it's not famous, having 7 audience per week. That is totally fine. Like, yeah, it's. I mean, everything has its own purpose. Like, looking back at it, listening to any of the single podcasts, there's even one podcast where we invited 2 of our friends and we just have a very, very long conversation. It's very long, it's terribly long, but then we enjoyed it a lot. So I think that's the main point about it, the podcast. It's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily have to be a product. It can be just a conversation where we just record a cool conversation about me and my girlfriend, and I find it quite well. Like we created a product, a content to share while actually maintaining our relationship, and then it became a platform for us to talk about stuff that I want to talk. Like all those topics are topics which I want to discuss with Verene as well, because just felt like it's interesting. So yeah, I mean it's quite tired after every single episode, but yeah, I'm quite happy to have done this. So in the end, I'd just like to say a great thank you to the Not Overthinking podcast. I mean, actually, because I only listen it while I drive, I don't have a habit of listening it while I do things. I generally listen to music when I'm on commute, like on public transport, or like when I'm walking, or like even doing work or something. So I don't really listen to that. So I've been stopping for quite some time since I'm in the UK and I don't drive here. I'll see. Maybe I'll fit it somewhere in one of my schedule or something. But yeah, thanks a lot for the podcast, for accompanying me and then letting me do so many things. Yeah, and thanks everyone for watching this video. If you like this video, do like, share and subscribe, and maybe consider checking out this video suggested by YouTube, or even the Intos podcast, which is the podcast which me and my girlfriend created, and I talked about it in this video as well. Yeah, and other than that, thanks everyone for watching, and hope to see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.